Hello, hello. Good evening and welcome to the ICA. I'm Monica Garza. I'm the Charlotte Wagner Director of Education here at the ICA. And I want to thank you for being here and braving this really crazy weather that we had earlier today. High winds, rain, snow, I heard maybe sleet. Did not deter any of you from being here with us, so we greatly appreciate it. Thank you all. We are here tonight to help celebrate this week's opening of an exhibition featuring the stunning and moving work of artist Firelei Báez. Our week started with welcoming 1,000 people at Tuesday night's opening, numerous press interviews on Wednesday, and now here we are on Thursday with you. Tonight's Artist Voice program features 3 talented individuals that we are thrilled to bring together. Our first guest speaker truly doesn't need an introduction. I am, of course, speaking of Firelei Báez. Over the past 15 years, Firelei has made work that I have to take off my glasses. I'm not reading I didn't put my reading glasses on. Sorry. Sorry about that. There, I can see now. Over the past 15 years, Firelei has made work that explores the multi-layered legacy of colonial histories and the African diaspora in the Caribbean and beyond. Her work stops you in your tracks with her great beauty, meaning, and awe. Firelei's work has been presented in many significant international exhibitions, including an installation of the ICA Watershed in East Boston in 2021. Hope you all saw that. Which later traveled to the Momentary in Bentonville, Arkansas. She also was included in the Milk of Dreams at the 59th Venice Biennale in 2022. Recent solo presentations of Firelei's work include exhibitions at the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Andy Warhol Museum, and the Perez Art Museum in Miami. She has recently participated in several group exhibitions at art institutions such as the National Gallery of Art in DC and the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. She is a recipient of many awards, most recently the Cooper Union's President's Citation and the Philip Guston Rome Prize. Firelei's work is held in collections around the world, including the Baltimore Museum of Art, Crystal Bridges, Dallas Museum of Art, SF MoMA, Guggenheim, Abu Dhabi, Tate in London, and ICA Boston. She studied art at the Cooper Union School, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and Hunter College, where she completed her graduate studies. We are so thankful to have you here today, Firelei. I'm also personally grateful to you for always supporting our work in the education department over the years, whether they be through public talks that we've asked you to do, teacher resources, or even stopping to talk to a class this morning of students in the galleries. Thank you for that. Julie Crooks is a curator at the Art Gallery of Ontario in the Arts of Global Africa and the Diaspora. She holds a PhD from the Department of History of Art and Archaeology from the University of London. Joining the AGO in 2017, she has curated a number of exhibitions, including Free Black North in 2017, Micheline Thomas Femme Noire in 2018, and presentations from the permanent collection, such as photography, 1920s, 1940s, Women in Focus. Julie also oversaw the Tate Britain's Life Between Islands, British Caribbean Art from 1950s to Now installation. She has actively participated in bringing works by Black artists into the AGO collection, and most notably, the Montgomery Collection of Caribbean Photographs, which was acquired in 2019. Joining Firelei and Julie on the stage is my colleague, and also the moderator for the evening, Ruth Erickson, the ICA's Barbara Lee Chief Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs. Ruth first joined the ICA as a research fellow for Leap Before You Look, Black Mountain College, 1933 to 1957. Since then, she has organized numerous exhibitions over the years, including Mark Dion, Misadventures of a 21st Century Naturalist, Wangechi Mutu, A Promise to Communicate, and Guadalupe Maravilla, Mariposa Relámpago at the ICA's Watershed in East Boston in 2023. Ruth is currently leading the installation of this summer's ambitious, monumental watershed exhibition featuring the work of Hugh Locke, which I hope you all will come back to see this summer. And now, thank you all again for being here, and now I invite our speakers to the stage.
Thank you, Monica. And again, a warm thanks for everybody being here with us tonight, and especially to my speakers. And I first just want to say that the exhibition upstairs, Firelei, is such a triumph. And in addition to making an exhibition, you also made an incredible book that I'm holding here in my hands. And it's a little bit the inspiration for why we brought these two incredible women together, because Julie Crooks has an incredible essay in this book, and you two have also had a chance to work together. And as I was thinking about a conversation between both of you, there are so many interesting points of connection. But I wanted to start with the word diaspora as a point of connection that both in the department that you run at the AGO, Julie, and also in thinking about the kind of, in Firelei, in so much of your work, it's, the diaspora is about these points of connection, kind of generative histories and myths, and thinking about African and Caribbean connections, and then in your own personal life as well, being born to Haitian and Dominican parents, growing up in Miami. So, and what I was thinking about is, while the diaspora begins with the physical movement of people, its processes produce so many manifold cultural, creative, formal possibilities. And so I thought I would just begin by asking what diaspora means to each of you in your practices as a curator and as an artist.
You want to go first? You go. Okay. So I think my experience of it has been to think of it as a gift of existing as a bridge, where because you're a child of diaspora, there is not really belonging in either and belonging in both. So you get to see both fully by being in the margins of either. So a work like the arrangement of book pages upstairs is in that spirit. I think Hispaniolians, both Dominicans and Haitians, we're like dandelions. And there are, before New York was even a state or a glimmer in someone's eye, while it was even a visitation space for the Dutch, there was already a Dominican mulatto trading iron pots with Native Americans. It's a spirit of adventure that has been there probably before Western contact. There was a lot of migration happening between the Caribs and Tainos to begin with. So maybe it's something quite literally in the water or in the archipelagic way the islands are arranged, where you want to communicate and where borders become something that is purely man-made. The landscape itself urges you to connect further. So that's diaspora for me.
I think it's very similar to what Firelei has explained, how it manifests in her work, actually, and who she is as a person. And I always think about diaspora, coming from Canada or living in Canada, what that means to me. And I think you said it, it's kind of in its multiplicity that diaspora is not one thing, and you can actually push it out even more in terms of a kind of transnational identities. And those are the ideas and notions that really fascinate me. So an artist like Firelei, Haitian Dominican, Janet Ellers, Trinidadian living in Denmark, and doing work around kind of post-coloniality and Black feminism, and of course rooted in the kind of Caribbean experience. Alberta Whittle, half Bajan, half Scottish, living in Scotland. And, so there's so many variations. And I think it's Stuart Hall who talks about, if I ask you where you're from in the diaspora, your answer should be very complicated. And I really love that idea, that it's not straightforward. And that is, as Firelei says, the beauty of diaspora. Maybe it is in the water, in a way.
It feels so creatively generative in both of your descriptions. And this is the work that you were referring to, Man Without a Country, which has a much longer title. But in this work, which we're so grateful to have in the ICA's collection, this is a series of decommissioned books and book pages that provide one kind of knowledge. And here you've intervened on those pages to produce this kind of other forms of knowing. And I wonder if you could just talk about, this work and what it meant for you in your practice for, opening up the possibilities of some of the kind of larger paintings that we see come a little later.
Yeah, so, as an art student, you're always looking for, you have all these ideas, but very low budgets, and you want to find the materials to make the work. And this was an accessible way to branch into both ideas and materiality. Most libraries will have that free books cart that you'll either have book covers or things you can access. And I was curious as to why those materials would be discarded. And sometimes you want space. Hi, Asia. Oh my goodness. You want the materials, you want to be able to create space for new things. But it's also, I think, what I took it to be as a student, it was also a marker of what the institution no longer thought of itself as, and what it no longer wanted to foster. So there were things like Herbert Spencer and Darwinian Economics was one of the books that I, allowed me to go into these information rabbit holes. And so these arrangement of book pages became atemporal ways, like a choose your journey way of exploring a moment in history for me and for the viewer. So you could come in at any point. And the one moment I was trying to explore here was a part of Dominican history around this period where something like 50,000 Dominicans of Haitian descent were made stateless because the Dominican Republic put in place a law informed by German law that dictated citizenship by 3 generations. So you had to have papers from your grandparents to prove Dominican citizenship. And so thinking of what, that not being singular, but what were all the conditions from the Haitian Revolution to American industry to the Monroe Doctrine, all these different things to explore. There are all the laws, all the factual, quote unquote, history, all the projections of desire that go along with that history, and then all the psychic tools and interventions that were done to counter that. And for me, as a young person, as a child growing up in the Dominican Republic, I remember always hearing all these stories that you see as you traverse the work. One of the earliest works that is in the gallery is that grisage drawing of the figure, kind of like reveling in her hair while a bird picks at it. There were stories like that were told to me of how to conform to culture. Like, if you don't do this, you'll become this wild thing. If you do this, you can have the safety of community and of culture. So knowing what powers came with what, relinquishing or taking of control. And so there are interventions of ciguapas and birds and mythic creatures that open up those boundaries and give room for unruliness. There are actually I'm rambling, I'm sorry guys, but some of my favorite paintings are like Persian miniatures and like Celtic miniatures. The places where the artists, there's usually like a very strict way of depicting the figure in the center, but the marginalia, the places around that is where the artist gets to go wild and like invent and make things that are like expressions of freedom. And I thought that our version of marginalia were the personal videos that were posted online. At that time, YouTube around 2008 was still something that was being, people were getting familiar with. And there would be these videos of people daggering, this like wild dance from Jamaica where it's like unruly and like bodily and body. And there would be these mass gathering fights of young women called wildings. And they just seemed like this rupture. And I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist young child in the Dominican Republic. It's kind of funny how that religion took over the global South. I have friends from Ghana and from Tennessee and from California, and they all have the same, like, oh, you had to go through that texturized vegetable protein. Like, we had the same Sabbath meal. But that growing within such a binding experience, it was thrilling to see people who could access that, even though it felt disruptive and probably not a healthy way of or easy way of navigating the world, that they carved out those spaces, and they were usually spaces that were being encouraged by their elders. So rupture as a place of construction, and in the way that Saidiya Hartman explains in her fabulation, that basically we as a strict society history is made of centers, but the future, new spaces are made out of rupture. And so exploring both, that's what came in there. And
one of the ways that I feel freedom in your work is the way that you address and inhabit the human body. And I think in these earliest works in the exhibition, like the one you mentioned, sort of making right out of grad school, there's this incredible combination of, highly detailed figuration and these pools of abstraction with the kind of pores that you see and that sense of freedom. And I was thinking about sort of the body as a vessel, and even you just mentioning those wilding videos and all those dance videos, of thinking of this body as something that, there are all these constraints around, and yet have these episodes of kind of radical freedom, and how that is kind of maintained, or this is an incredible example of it, sort of held together in your work. And so I just wanted to, ask you a little bit about what drew you to the human body, and how has that been a vessel in your practice for this kind of exposure of freedom?
Yeah, so the body was always a ground of, as a femme, it was always taught as like, there are many things out of your control, but your presentation is one place where you can start to negotiate that engagement. I spoke in a conversation with Thelma Golden of how even that is, presentation has always been a tool for resistance, as much as it has been a form of entrapment. So if you think of like propriety, performing propriety, how in the civil rights movement, dressing in your Sunday best was a way of like asserting presence and flair. So how that double-edged sword can have so much power. I was always interested in how to give room and mark the power in the letting go. To pause, because I am someone who, as much as I want to be just like wild and unruly, I have that training in me to just be like, always make things beautiful and always try to find place and find equilibrium. So to know that I don't have to see my reflection to appreciate it and fully honor it, that anything that is can be radically different from me is still valuable and worthy of like, loving and sheltering. But also that maybe in as much as I love the controlled hand, that drawing is like that was a form of freedom after undergraduate school. Cooper Union had this space where they were very formal. They didn't allow figuration because it came preloaded with identity, and you had to go to war every critique to say this is why this space is worthy. And so I had to learn to do this double speak through abstraction. And so I got very good at abstraction. But I didn't feel at that time that I could include all the people I loved and have them fully understand what an abstract painting meant. So I did those drawings in the end of being like, okay, I'm no longer at Cooper. Who do I love? What do I want to say? Who do I want to like just revel in? And there were these forums of women transitioning to their natural hair and how radical it seemed to just have like curly hair. To have, you know, even, I think it was like 2019. It was the first Dominican curly hair salon ever was put in place. And there were news stories of how unprofessional it was to walk in the streets with your natural hair. And so that something as simple as just being yourself in a healthy way is an act of resistance. And so those were those drawings, just being like, you know, geek out, do all the things that I love. A tightly rendered drawing is my reset button of like, ooh, juicy. And then I realized that as much as I revel in something that tightly rendered, it is far more generous to withhold in certain times, to give room for the viewer to make along with me, that in the act of viewing, you are projecting yourself and creating the image along with me. So very rarely will I have a full face, and mostly because there is that tradition of casta painting in Latin America, where every part of the body is codified. The width of your smile, the width of your nose, etc. They quite literally created a very articulated caste system that, even though it's not fully consciously acknowledged in culture today, is part of the everyday language. A newscaster's broad smile will be like, she's this, quote unquote, and then that'll be like, that means she's a quarter black, a bit of Indian, a bit of European, and like, it'll just be broken down and codified. And so I thought that was like a built-in psychic violence I wanted to just skip. I wanted to go right over the strictures and get to the freedom of it. The moments of resistance, the moments of healing, of care that are there. Like, so changing the subject from, the gaze from outside to within.
That's where those moments of abstraction and obliteration are
Yes.
so powerful upstairs. This is a perfect segue, because one of the incredible interventions you made in our architecture of this building is that you've made arched doorways throughout the galleries upstairs. And it really changes the space. And Julie, your contribution to this book centers on an exhibition that you curated, Fragments of Epic Memory. And in that installation, Firelei positioned 2 arched paintings, this is one of them, within a trompe-l'oeil piece of an arched arcade that sort of appears to go forever, as you can see here in the center. And I wanted to ask you, you know, the arch is an actual architectural design element in both our project as well in this project that you did at the AGO. You know, what draws each of you to the arch? What is its significance within your practices as an exhibition maker? Maybe to begin, Julie.
You know, I didn't think about it before this exhibition, of course, but there are so many, the arch symbolizes and is significant of so many things in history. It's a, you know, part of architecture. I think for the Caribbean, the idea of the arc or the archipelago, you know, this kind of irregular arc-shaped group of islands. So it seemed like a kind of natural motif for the show. So in the show, they're kind of repeating arches. But then, of course, Firelei's work, adjusting the moon, so there were the diptych. And we had to kind of figure out, how can we install this work? It had been installed in the Ford Foundation show beautifully. And of course, upstairs, it took my breath away. And I was very jealous that we couldn't we couldn't have installed it at the AGO in that way, because it's actually luminous upstairs. Like it feels like there is a light box, and I kind of crept behind to see, what is the magic here. But I think for me, that arc is a portal. You literally start the show upstairs, walking in, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is so genius. Stepping into Sansui, right, and the kind of double edges of that painting and of that sculpture, actually. So yeah, for me, I think there are so many meanings of this opening to the past, to the present. The vinyl work that Firelei designed for us is, as you say, a trompe-l'oeil, so this kind of repeating arches. And I feel as if I started the essay in the catalog thinking about work by Dion Brand and talking about the Middle Passage. And so these figures for me are kind of stepping out, and the fact that that one figure's toe is kind of stepping into the gallery space, so it becomes this kind of interaction. And I got really excited when I was speaking to Firelei about, I was daunted. Of course, this was the daunting task for me. But after speaking to Firelei, I kept thinking about, that unruliness that you spoke about, the liberation and emancipation, because the show was literally envisioned, thinking about that period of emancipation in the Caribbean. And the diptych ends the show, so literally about liberation. And of course, the bursts of color that is, kind of coming out of the figure. So I mean, I'm going to start rambling on about arches, but I think they're so important in Firelei's work, and the exhibition literally ends with the arch, So again, you're kind of stepping out from this incredible experience into the world, having, had these moments of engagement. So yeah, I'll stop there.
And you have an arched doorway in your studio, and you have a number of paintings in the exhibition.
I'll always mark a space. I'll even just still paint the arch. They're not actually arched. They're painted, so it feels like it just changes the tension of the doorway. Formally, engineering-wise, an arch is only made by creating this point of tension. There's just everything around it is just suspended in one thing. Otherwise, everything collapses. The keystone, the mason, the thing that requires a specific knowledge to create and to enter. And so I like the idea that these, they're also used in a lot of 18th and 19th century architecture. They were meant to be heraldic, beyond human scale. And it's kind of funny, going to architecture school, to Cooper, they told us how, as humans, we think we are, in our mind, psychologically, human scale is 8 feet. Anything under 8 feet, we're like, oh, that's really small. What is this? So there are different names for different scales. And so by the time you get to a 12-foot, 15-foot archway, you're reaching a heraldic scale, and then you are, it becomes a bit sacred. So calibrating all of those is always interesting to see. because it then changes the dynamic of how what you consider is your body versus something that becomes then nature. Like the arch is also something that suggests a grotto, and entering, when you enter a cave, it's usually similar information. And so then creating something like the Drexia room that is inviting you to let your mind wander and to associate into more natural spaces.
There are some really surprising materials that make your way into some of your paintings and art. And some of them are referenced on medium lines. Like, I know there's this incredible painting upstairs of this big wave that's in the Guggenheim's collection. And it has 3 pounds of salt in the painting on the surface of it. You mentioned during our press preview, there's a dragonfly stuck in one of your paintings. In this room, this work that we're looking at the beginning of here came in a number of crates that included incense and plants and books and so many other elements. And so I wonder, I was thinking about materials, and there's so much material intelligence in how you work, but then also I think these materials have a kind of alchemical quality to them, or they, reference or transport experiences. So I just wanted to sort of ask you about some of those unusual materials, the things that people might be surprised, and what do those materials in any one work kind of, what do they suggest about kind of your practice or conjure?
So one like, I guess, Easter egg is that Cooper Union makes us all into mad scientists. They give us this edict of your work needs to survive you by at least 100 years. So they really push you exploring every possible material, learning its limits, but also knowing what it can bear. And so there's always like strict archival rules, and leaving Cooper, one of the first lessons Neri Ward taught me was like, you gotta let that go. That's an archivist's job. You should try to explore your ideas. But then I'm bound by both. Like, how do I express something that is exciting and opens a door? Then I'm always like, I know the rules. So I know just how far to push it. So in that one painting of the wave, it was done over a map, a diagram of a hospital in New Orleans. And
maybe we can go back to it. It's just a few back, 6 or so.
It was essentially, I was doing a residency at the New Orleans Center, at the Joan Mitchell Center for Art, and it's this wonderful residency with like extremely generous. That's another one of those WPA books. So I found this book, there it is, of diagrams for architectural diagrams for significant sites in New Orleans, in Louisiana in general. And this became the last place of refuge. It started as a hospital for sailors, and then it was a psychiatric hospital, and then became the only free space or accessible space for healthcare. And if you've ever heard of the Tuskegee Airmen, you know how fraught it is to reach for healthcare when you might be risking your life to begin with by going for it. So during Katrina, this space lost all power. And so how that balance of refuge and healing, and I wanted to create a place of ablution, like water was a fraught thing with a flood. But there is also the meaning of water with Yemonja, which is the Yoruba deity or a spirit of the ocean in particular, but the color blue. So essentially, what can I as an artist reach for this space? And it was a prayer for just like a reset. What can I send energetically back into it? And salt is something that ionizes and cleanses a space on its own. So every time the viewer approaches this painting, they leave a bit of themselves behind and they further crystallize it. So it's actively changing. And because it is crystallized, this photo will never tell you what the painting is like. You can only experience it by moving around it. a singular view of it will never give you the full painting. You have to traverse it to see it. And it's one of those things where the environment I made it in influences completely what it is. So I did the original pour. It had this perfect hokusai where the tip of the wave ended at the top of the hospital. And I was like, yes, stay there, please. 2 hours later, a perfect Virgin Mary right in the center. I was like, yes, Himonja, hello, how are you? And you see it at the crest of the wave. There was like quite literally, and I made a vinyl intervention for the VCU where I did quite literally made it more illustrative of the figure in the center, like that Gallic blue, and of course she dissolved. And I was like, just, you know, I had to follow the material and bring it out. And in the end, when you see it up close, you see that the wave becomes something between like a stalactite. It's a solid stone, it's water, it's all these different things that are physical. And I think nature is the best painter. All I can do is just follow along with it, you know?
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's incredible to think of the salt in this case of like, it's a healing property, it's something that comes from the sea, it's something that creates this incredible surface that, as you said, is kind of dimensional and changes as you walk around it. And I didn't even think of the idea that it's also then ever changing and it's a living thing, which I heard you talk about a lot during installation. Like, these are things I put into the world that then have lives of their own. I wanted to ask, because all three of us are students of art history. For better or for worse, we've committed our professional life, if not our personal lives, to art. And, you know, I'm often asked by students who are seeking advice, you know, why art history? Should I do a PhD in art history? And I think in a culture where so much of the humanities are under attack or under-resourced, and, you know, I think all of us recognize the kind of problematic histories that are part of museums and art history, I just wonder what tethers you back to this field of returning, you know, time and time again. What kind of feeds your souls within the field? And maybe I'll start with you, Julie, because what keeps you tethered?
It's a fraught question now. The tethering is waning thin, I think. But I think what keeps me going are artists like Firelei. I'm being able to work with someone who's so incredibly smart and articulate about the work that she's producing, and watching the trajectory of her practice as well, and really trying to dismantle. I think that's what Firelei is doing in her work, but pulling apart the kind of Eurocentric, Western, philosophical notion of art history and making these kinds of interventions. And I just want to, I had to write it down because I knew I'd forget. Moving forward after this talk, I'm going to quote the title of the first work in the show, which is, "Once we have torn shit down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming." I mean, if that doesn't kind of sum up everything, and definitely how I feel about art history and the potential and possibilities, it's in that title. And so on the days when I get a little bit frustrated, and I think thinking about these interventions, that is an intervention. That's a way of really moving past while being within, I think. That's my answer.
Beautiful. It is such a good title.
It is such a good title.
Thank you. It's incredible. Okay, so I want to end with a shout out to our teen programs here. As you both may know, and the audience, ICA has an incredible nationally recognized teen program. And one of my favorite aspects is the artist interview program. And Firelei, I think you met with them when you were doing your Watershed installation, yes. So you might recall this. So they always end their artist interviews, they conclude everyone with what they call a lightning round, which is a series of short questions. So if you're game, let's just try it here. Just say the first thing that comes to mind, okay? And I got these from the teens. Firelei, pancakes or waffles?
Waffles, Belgian.
Julie, favorite animal?
Leopard.
Firelei, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, there's no way. There's no way. There's too many. I'm not binding myself to one answer.
All right, Julie, sandals or sneakers?
Oh, sneakers.
Firelei, favorite smell?
Well, in this installation, there's too many, but I'll give one that I love that it gets me in the zone in the studio, and it's this Oman incense. It's this resin that you can transform any space, and it just feels like hallowed. You go in and you're like, yes, I'm in the space of making.
And that smell when we opened those crates was there.
I know, I wish we didn't have sprinklers. You guys would be smelling it when you enter.
All right, Julie, if you could travel to one place in the world tonight, where would it be?
Oh, shoot. Oh, my God, that's so hard. Morocco.
Yes.
Firelei, olive oil or coconut oil?
A very fragrant olive oil, but I'd say avocado has range. Yeah. No singular thing. Yeah.
I couldn't ask Firelei this question, so Julie, favorite color?
Oh, my goodness. Purple, I think.
Royalty.
Yes.
Firelei, if you could bring one non-necessity to a desert island, what would it be?
My library.
That'd be a big thing to bring.
It's imagination, so we can just teleport it. They invented a machine already. It's in the beginnings of it.
All right, last question. Julie, beaches or mountains?
Beaches.
We're Caribbean, we get both.
Well, this is true. It depends on what island.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That concludes the lightning round.
Very, very gentle. Thank
And
you.
now we'll open it up for questions from the audience. And I think there's some microphones that are traveling around. There's one right down here. Thank you, Eliza.
We're on a hike for me. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. Thank you for your show. Thank you for your art. I'm going to do that first. But this is a very specific question. I was really intrigued by the retableau painting, sort of deep within the installation. I've seen you use fragmented bodies before, and so the icon itself is not new entirely, but it was very newly framed as very centralized and very potent, and especially with the way that it sort of presented itself in the exhibition. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what this piece is doing and what you're thinking about.
Sure. So there are threads of my practice that have not been very publicly shown. And so along with the sweetness, there's always a bite. This imagery is also part of the book page arrangement piece that's in the ICA collection. And like the color blue, the color red is one that I usually try to explore. This was inspired by both the very Americana tradition of trompe-l'oeil painting. And there was recently a show of Cubism, so Braque and Picasso inspired by a lot of that same trompe-l'oeil. And just creating that fake wood, the faux bois, the perfect grain. And it's something that every DIYer at home will have the little rubber stamp and you can try to do your own. There was this incredible exhibition at the Met called Interwoven Globe, and it's how the cross-pollination through textile all around the world. And they had this little scrap of toile that was from, a young debutante's dress in Latin America. And it was done in this cochineal red. So red made from these Mexican bugs that if you have organic strawberry yogurt today, you're probably eating those bugs. They're, the perfect red. And color being a strong commodity, it was usually only allowed to be worn by cardinals or people in power, like the church. The only other way that a layperson could wear it was by either paying a sumptuary tax really expensively, or to enact colonization, so to like risk life and limb and live and do things in Latin America that were perhaps not necessarily good for either party, but created whole new worlds. So this is like baby me working in the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, actually. They have this great residency that I recommend all young artists try, where they give you a space for 7 months and you can be there with writers. And it was very much like The Shining in the sense that there was so much snow. I had like 3-foot icicles I had to like kick down to get to the studio. And I was reading papers like Andrade's Anthropophagia, and how even that in itself was, you know, it's a paper that's used to justify or to explain modernism in Latin America, specifically through Brazil, but that in itself was also an invention. So there's call and response that goes back and forth. What is real, the faux bois, what is an intervention? And so, you know, it was a bit didactic, but very brave in the sense to show it in that context with the wall. That was Eva being like, you know what? Art is not always an easy chair. We can challenge, we can grow, we can like learn new things. And so I was like, okay, I have full trust, let's do it. You guys are you're gonna be okay going into this archway and being like, what is this young lady doing in this textile? Not myself, the woman carried in the litter in the image. But I recommend that catalog, by the way. The Interwoven Globe catalog is phenomenal. And I think the baby had a question. I was very excited to hear it.
The question was, what was your favorite painting from the exhibition?
That's like, there's this movie called Sophie's Choice that you'll watch when you get older. But that is it's a tough question. But I have to say that my mind is still in the studio. I am currently making several versions of the last painting, almost the last painting you saw in the show, that is in all the advertisements with the flowers and the body turning into glass. So that's, if not the favorite, the one that my mind is most consumed by right now.
It's the one you finished just a short time ago.
Yes, they snatched it from my cold hands.
Happy to premiere here at the ICA and share it with audiences for the first time.
There you go, that one.
This is the work. Incredible. Talk about the body and freedom and control there, and just that holding those two together.
So that image came to me out of riding the subway late at night, and how everybody perfects themselves to go out over the weekend, and then after all the reveling, you're just kind of like slowly slipping into whatever comes. And so this is supposed to be a Dutch nautical map of winds, so turning natural forces into humanly understandable things. And so after being in Venice and seeing all that beautiful blown glass, thinking what are the forces that make you both perfect yourself and then slowly slip. And so, yeah, just a place to geek out over everything from Dutch painting to party girls. Yeah.
One last question? Yeah. There's two down here. We can get them both in. You're on the same row. You're so close.
Thank you so much for holding this talk to everyone and everyone involved in the exhibition. I was wondering, your work involves a lot of myths and oral traditions that have been long being used in these cultures, and I was wondering if there's anything you found particularly challenging when trying to bridge oral traditions that are generational with a more contemporary lens of the themes that your practice entails.
So I always think of myths and folklore and tales like that as like psychic guards, like the things that we build to forewarn or to open doorways. And there's a saying that humans will do anything as long as they think someone else did it before them. So that's what stories do for us. And one of the most contemporary and fruitful stories that have influenced so many visual and just artists in general is the Drexciya myth by two young men from Detroit. And they thought of this over a series of 9 albums. And so this room is inspired by them. They were electronic DJs from Detroit at a time when Detroit was blighted by both the crack epidemic and by the fall of industrialization in the city. And so to think of a space, to envision a place of both futurity, like if we think of a lot of science fiction, the future, if it's a broken world, it usually imagines a black and brown body as either not existing or being at its lowest depth. And so to think of a future where it was not even thinking of that, like how do we imagine brilliance and technological advancement, Black excellence that is outside of all these strictures? And they started from a point that is very well known in history. The transatlantic slave trade is something we're all still horrified by. We can't even look directly at. And people like Turner bravely did paintings like the slave ship where humans would be thrown overboard for insurance value. So these two young men thought, this is a point of history. What if the women who were thrown overboard, the Black enslaved women what if they survived? What if the pregnant ones survived and their baby survived and were able to breathe underwater? And were able to create this technologically advanced, incredible space, their joy, their fights, just nuance within that space. What would it be like? And again, if you think of stories as frivolous things, you'd just be like, well, why are you wasting your time on that? But to think of a space for being outside of the concrete facts of the environment and to give that gift to other people is just an incredible psychic tool. That is a scientific thing. So myth is something we give each other. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Last question.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for being here. I'm Dominican, so this is very exciting to see a fellow Dominican making such amazing art. And my question has to do with, I'd be interested in hearing about any challenges you may have faced as you were putting together this exhibition or any of the pieces displayed.
Okay. Poor Ruth, she survived. She's become an expert snipper. All those things that you see in that space are hand done. They're lovingly constructed. Everything was already a challenge to begin with, and then we had to contend with the fire department. So there is the, I always forget the name of that myth or that philosophical proposition, the ship of Theseus. So everything but the paintings has been reconstructed to fit new parameters. And so we have the spirit of the installation, but it had to be lovingly, through so much hard work. Poor Tessa, bravely, Tessa and Ruth found ways to make, and the whole installation team, to make this thing exist and feel as enveloping and warm and welcoming as I had hoped. The original inspiration was growing up in geographies with a lot of hurricanes, being in the Caribbean and in Miami, where a blue tarp would mean there was probably a hurricane that had just blown your roof away or had done some damage, but it meant usually a sign of shelter and of refuge or disaster, and both. And for adults, it's probably something very triggering, but as a child, seeing pinpricks of light coming through seemed magical, and it was something that helped me associate with larger spaces, the ocean, the being under a forest canopy. And I wanted to create something like that wonder, that lantern for other viewers, so you can associate both as you engage with it.
Well, thank you so much, Julie and Firelei. Let's give you a round of applause.